listening to The Kula Ring, a podcast made for manufacturing marketers. Here are Carmen Perry and Jeff White.
Welcome to The Kula Ring, a podcast for manufacturing marketers brought to you by Kula Partners. My name is Jeff White, and joining me today is Carmen Perry. Carmen, how you doing, sir?
All is well, and you?
I'm doing great.
It's good to be recording another show, and I think today, it's everybody. Look, content is king. Everybody wants to talk about content and marketing, and not that that's new. But for B2B manufacturer, to say that they struggle, the more that content gets technical would be perhaps an understatement. I mean, it's just a decision of almost not producing technical content at all because they think if they do it, it's just going to be wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
It really does.
I mean, it doesn't make sense, but it is what we see.
It is certainly the case for most organizations,
or at least many. So I'm excited for today's guest because I like chatting with folks who have cracked the technical content nut, as it were, and have done so in an interesting, innovative way. So let's dive in.
Well, and I think too, what's particularly interesting is that every time we see somebody who's doing this well, they're often coming at it from a different perspective, which our guest is as well. He's a bit of an accidental marketer.
Yeah,
really, which I think is what's so interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting. Anyway, enough about that. Why don't we get him introduced? So joining us today is Greg Paulsen. Greg is a director, applications engineering and marketing at Xometry. Welcome to the Kula Ring.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
It's awesome to have you on the show, mate. But why don't you first? I think a lot of our audience will have heard of Xometry by this point, but maybe for those who haven't, introduce the firm if you would, and just tell us a little bit about you and your role there.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I love it when someone's like, "Oh, everybody's must have heard of Xometry by now," because I've been with that organization long enough where I remember the first time we got a natural mention without having to pay for it. I've been with Xometry for about 8.5 years now. The company's about 8.5 years old, so it checks out. It's just like I said, I get a giggle inside every time I hear someone say like, "Oh yeah, you guys know this." I was like, "You know about us? Really? That's so cool." But we've definitely done a lot over the years. And Xometry is a digital manufacturing marketplace. We looked at how a lot of what I would call traditional businesses have been disrupted over the years with marketplace models. Think what Airbnb has done for lodging, or what Uber has done for transportation, or what Amazon has done for retail. In manufacturing, a very similar story. It classically was a local to local experience, whether you were the buyer, the person who needed stuff custom manufactured, or the supplier, the person who's doing the manufacturing. You didn't often have the reach or the know-how. Like, you didn't have this, omnipotent view of what the industry was to where to source parts when there's available. And also, there's a lot of opacity in the response you got back. I lived in the world, by the way, like I am a non-traditional marketer or accidental marketer, if you will, because I was someone who's worked in engineering and product development before this. I've done a lot of sourcing. I've also been a supplier myself, working in advanced manufacturing, additive manufacturing to be particular. And I know this RFQ feedback lifecycle where you're often waiting days just to get a quote response back. And when you do, from several sources, they're all over the place. So Xometry looked at this whole mess of things, these inefficiencies within the marketplace, and said, what if we just put technology, just boom, right up front? And they started with digital online quoting. So instead of a RFQ wait, we actually use AI and machine learning to predict the cost of parts. So you get, instead of a wait and see, you get a buy it now experience on pricing for custom manufactured parts. Now we offer over 17 different processes. And of course, just like Uber, Amazon, Airbnb, you're nothing without a really strong supplier base. So our supply chain, instead of being just one shop, and trying to limit what one shop can do, which you run into capacity constraints and everything else that we find inefficient in the market, we are a marketplace. We are connected to thousands of suppliers that have been vetted through our system who are fulfilling the work ordered. So for our customers, it's kind of instant gratification on sourcing custom manufactured parts. For the suppliers, the people who are making it, it's instant gratification on getting work on demand that fits them really well. We use AI matchmaking on that side. So it's a really great digital transformation from what you see in a typically archaic industry. Yeah.
I love that introduction, and I must say, I think it's the first time the word omnipotent has been used in this podcast, which it should not be the last. That is,
It's a great word.
isn't it? I'm kind of reminded of the little bit by Stewie and the Family Guy when he's talking about God. He says, "I rather like that God fellow. He's very theatrical. There's a plague here, some pestilence there, omnipotence. Got to get me some of that." Anyway. I digress. We can edit this out or leave it in the final version, Jeff.
It is the first time you've quoted the Family Guy in this show.
We may need to pay royalties or something.
Yeah, Greg. Yeah, as you mentioned, you're a non-traditional marketer. You've come at this from a very interesting perspective. From an engineering perspective and a technical one. What are you doing in the marketing function at Xometry?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And like I said, I began when this was a startup. So if you weren't selling the company, you weren't doing your job. If you were a software developer in the startup phase, you were a salesperson. If you were the CEO, you're definitely a salesperson. So you're CEO, financial officer, salesperson. And I joined in doing business development, but also a lot of project engineering. And we started kind of a project engineering and support team, but we're all salespeople, right? That's what you have to do to grow. I've found that in roles that I've had in the past throughout my career, I always kind of end up being the person who talks to the customer. I think my former CEO at my previous company said it best, where you could teach a good communicator technical skills, but you can't teach a highly technical person how to communicate sometimes. It's sometimes much more difficult in the reverse. And I've always had a knack for bridging what I found as technical information and abstracting or translating it down in a way where my audience can understand what I'm talking about. So I love working with engineers. I love working with highly technical people, and I've been a sponge for that. But my customers, no one knows 17 manufacturing processes back and forth. There's just there's a lot of information that you have to help them through and build out. And that's something that I've really excelled at and grown in, over the years.
I had in the prep notes for this show, I had jotted down that you mentioned that kind of before you kind of started this work, that the marketing didn't really speak to customers particularly well. I don't want to suggest that you were being overly critical of former colleagues or anything of that nature. I'm sure, but that was an interesting kind of observation that this isn't speaking. And you're just bringing that up now as that kind of being a bit of your secret sauce. Why is it that people struggle so much in getting technical content to connect with customers? I mean, the technical content is technical because they think that the customer is technical. So in some way, it ought to be almost predisposed to being to resonating with them. But why is that a challenge?
Well, for me, technical content is not a Wikipedia article. And that's the biggest difference is you can put up definitions and talk about what is. And that can be scalable. And, believe us, we have content writers and engineering content writers who can build those articles to gain SEO and traction and help the searchability, the findability of these services. But something that is very, very hard to replicate is empathy. So that is writing in a way where you've been in those shoes. So it's not just what is, but I always talk to our technical team and our content team. It's about the why. Why should I do this? And the situations in which I may need to choose these processes. And Xometry is in a very unique spot because we're not one shop just trying to tell you the capabilities, my one-page list of stuff that I can do. When you're representing thousands of manufacturers worth of capabilities, it's not what can you do, because we could do basically anything. It's why should you choose one process over another? What are the benefits for this? When do I make a decision to change those processes to scale? And that's something that very often you just have to have it learned. You have to have burned your hand thousands of times, like I have on the stove, and learned and corrected course along the way. And so when we build content at Xometry, especially the most relevant content, so things like that are on our capabilities pages, our design guides, our tech tips, it's because we've been there. It's because we've been there, and we want to tell you these things in a way so to help prevent dissatisfying experience for you as a customer, as well as for like the holistic manufacturing community, just with better intent and design and better knowledge up front, just like, garbage in, garbage out, like, this better intent up front leads to just multitudes of success on the tail end. And yeah, I was tapped on the shoulder for this. So talking about how we got to this point, as we were growing, we did have marketing teams. We had outsourced technical content writers. We had everything that you could think like a standard workflow would be as you scale, right? But we also looped in myself and our team of experts along the way, and started building out a kind of a review process to see what works, what kind of passes our sniff test, saying like, yeah, I would tell that to a customer, or what is this? What's the point here? Like, what are we really trying to do? What's the hook? Are we just putting words down, or are we trying to put some meaning behind them? And we would help kind of build out a better message or better story. And then ultimately, I started doing some videos. I call them edutaining videos for the company. We have like series like the Will It series, as well as things like recorded webinars and other multimedia content, where we helped build decision tools and educate in ways that we found really, really entertaining. I've been with the company for 8.5 years, but it's the last 3 years really that I've been what I consider on the full-time marketing side. So I've always been on either technical sales or operations side of things. But at some point we scaled to a point where it's like we just, they're like, Greg can't be part-time here, on this agency. Like, we want, your full-time attention to our tech, to just make sure that our marketing and what we communicate to our customers is technically robust.
I've got a couple of questions on that. I guess first things first, I want to know, you've been with the company for 8.5 years, and no matter how much experience one has, of course, that's a lot of time with one specific company, which means that the experience with external companies is kind of getting less and less over that time, if that makes any sense. Like, you're not working in for 20 or 30 different manufacturers in that time. You're working as Xometry, and I appreciate the big partner community, etc. I guess the root of my question is, how do you, what process do you have in place to kind of talk to customers to kind of make sure that alignment is real, versus you just think you're talking the customer's language? Because I think that can happen. Marketers, oh no, I'm talking the customer's language, but do they ever really check?
Yeah, honestly, that's my biggest fear, right? Is becoming stagnant or not staying relevant in the industries in which I'm, speaking to. 100%. You're like talking to my deepest fears, and right now, as far as my career goes. And I have had the fortune, I haven't had just one position at the company, right? I've had multiple positions, reporting to different branches, which has brought empathy. But yeah, 3 years in marketing. How do I stay relevant to what our industry is, which is constantly evolving? Truthfully, I live vicariously through our sales team, our technical sales engineers, and our operations team, and even our product team. So I have, I don't see verticals as clearly as I think a lot of our, a lot of our organization does. So I'm able to get involved and work, not just on the marketing aspect, but actual things like launches. Xometry, we just launched 5 more processes, so we're up to 17 now, because a couple of months ago, We launched a series of processes that are more tuned for scaled manufacturing, from extrusion, die casting, stamping, and some other processes along the way. And instead, I'm not just telling the news. Like, we're here talking about what the customer's experience is going to be. What type of materials they're going to have access to. Working back and forth with our technical experts and engineers, reaching out to our industry experts. Xometry has quite the Rolodex, and I haven't even mentioned Thomas yet, which has 560,000 suppliers, which is a Xometry acquisition last December, and that's just been super exciting to kind of expand our breadth, as well as the services that Thomas offers, from marketing services, website designs, and other things to help individual suppliers. But all of that, my goal is to continue to be a sponge, understand the information, abstract it and fold it into the pitch of Xometry, as well as have what I call like back pocket resources. If I don't have the answer, or I don't feel comfortable with how I'm explaining it, I will 100% bring in our technical engineering experts in those fields, or external sources to help validate and understand like where I am, and where I need to improve.
Understood. I'm just curious too. The last bit of this, and then I'm going to have to let Jeff have some of the airtime here and actually ask you a question. My goodness, I'm hogging up all the time. But I guess you started mentioning the layers of oversight and review, et cetera, for this content to ensure that it resonates and is technically accurate, et cetera. None of that sounds like a cheap endeavor. None of that sounds like an organization that's trying to skimp and say, you know what, I know we did this for 25 cents a word last year, but I think we could do it for 20 cents a word this year. It seems like it's the exact opposite of commoditization of the content. Am I reading that correctly, or do you face a lot of, I guess, cost pressures internally?
Oh, and don't get me wrong. I mean, when we have SEO content, we optimize for different efficiencies, right? So if we're building articles to get long tail SEO words, we may make something specific but short, or do even like a video or something around that. One of my first endeavors, actually, when I joined like a few years ago, was just getting words on Garolite CNC machining, which is Garolite is a fiberglass like composite that you can machine, and it's hard to source, but Xometry auto quotes it. So like it's one of those things where it's like we should be getting a lot of this business because we make it so incredibly easy to source parts. But building just a little bit of a piece of content, doing a little how-to video, all of a sudden you're getting page one rank on some of these words. So there's certain things that we work strategically. So we're not just making content for the sake of content, working on it with strategically to help build what we can in the business. And you're absolutely right. If you're just trying to run machine shops, you're going to run into a lot of trouble and a lot of competition. But there's other ways to work around it and grow your presence. From my end of things, I'm a full-time salaried employee. So I'm able to, if I'm not directly building this, I mean, I'd be a capacity constraint. And my other biggest fear is always being a bottleneck, right? When we talk about this, and I have team members who are just absolutely excellent, and we work really well together. So sometimes it's just checking and validating, and adding like some 2 cents to add some of that empathy into those technical works. But there are ways to scale with checks and balances that are more efficient. Like, it doesn't mean you have to write 100%, but it does mean you want to kind of put in a little bit of sniff test here and there, especially on whatever, like I would say, the main content, the stuff that you really want people to go to, because I know if they read that resource, they're going to be just so much more prepared in whatever process or decision making that they're going to do. So I really, really want to put a lot of time into, into those technologies, and creating like the main pages versus the peripherals, to just be, technically rich and grow from there.
Are your digital marketing efforts bringing in too many junk leads? Stop wasting time and distracting your sales team. Account-based marketing can help give your marketing strategy the laser focus on qualified buyers that you need to increase your pipeline velocity, close more deals, and grow your business faster. We've created a sample manufacturing ABM plan to help you get started. Download the sample manufacturing ABM plan at bit.ly/sampleabm. That's bit.ly/sampleabm.
One of the things that I think is, it's a bit of a giveaway talking to you right now because we're sharing a video, um, you know, at the same time as we're recording the audio here. And what no one else has the ability to see that I can see is that you actually have a workbench behind you. And I think you're probably the first marketer we've ever spoken with who actually has a way to actually explore things and work out, what you're going to do from a content perspective and actually, I would assume, build some things and solve some problems with that. Um, One of the things that I really liked about your approach is that you just mentioned this very specific fiberglass material. You're finding and creating content just for that, but you also use customer surveys and other things to kind of find out where those holes are. And I'm sure, just given the breadth and depth, I mean, you're covering 17 manufacturing processes here, there's going to be a lot. How do you prioritize what you create content for? And is it kind of a quantity of requests, or is it an opportunity? Are you evaluating things against revenue? Like how are you figuring out what to actually build next?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why.
Perfect. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
Carmen.
that's the answer. But it's yeah, I mean, we are a business, right? We have we have our goals on what we want to do for revenue, for retention, and building our customer base. There are some things that help out a lot, right? We are connected to our suppliers and we know what they can do, and then we know what we list on our site. So you can also see the gaps where a great example is right on actually when we acquired Thomas, we launched sheet cutting, which turned out, every shop that was doing sheet metal probably has a laser or some way of blinking sheet. But we didn't really advertise that directly to our customers. But we were able to go and build this out, and it's almost like a preparation step when you're forming a metal part, or is just cutting it out, and expand out the those materials and processes. So we sometimes will look at how can we celebrate what our suppliers can do really well and economically, right? We have this beautiful supply demand curve where if every one of my sheet metal suppliers can also cut a flat profile, then we could really be competitive in the market from the launch, and that will roll into, okay, how do I present it to my customer? So we're launching sheet cutting, not just what the technical requirements are, what are the materials, and materials and thicknesses or gauges that we could cut, but also, oh man, if I put this offering on my website, I need to have content that backs up and helps our customers understand and build their expectations around what happens when I press buy. And so we start building out that content kind of driving from our manufacturers. Sometimes there are, I won't say like oddballs, but there are strategic goals that we can see through data, and we'll make initiatives through that, or where we're looking to build a business unit. We'll build some prioritization to build content through that. But I also want to say that we have been a content machine for years. And if you're a new customer starting today, you may have not seen that super good article or that design guide that came out a few years back. So we are always inventing content, but we're also building automations and workflows in a way that to bring relevant content that's been created to our customers to give them like a holistic experience of Xometry. So I've been in that. You kind of get these ebbs and flows of throughout the years with technical content where you always have to create because everything's new, and then at some point you get to a stage where it may not be new to me, but it's new to that new customer, right? And using that content or rehashing in certain ways to to take one piece and turn it into like, can this written piece be a guide, like a poster guide? Can it be a video? Can it be, a little audio clip? Like, can it be like a social post? And taking that and reforming it in different ways to present it in new ways. So what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of ways to transform your existing content and have it work harder for you than just as it's originally created.
I'm kind of curious. I think when a lot of people are, a lot of marketers are producing content, if they think about where it kind of fits within the customer journey, there's a strong prioritization of kind of buying stage or decision stage content. That's where often people start, and certainly awareness stage content is is first and foremost on a lot of people's minds. I find that a lot of marketers kind of um, maybe they don't get to the onboarding content or the kind of the early stage that when somebody's just become a customer, they're just starting to accept their first deliveries or what have you. Um, I, have you thought about it kind of through that lens? It seemed to me like you were kind of hinting at that some of the content that you were kind of automating and whatnot was for existing customers to help in that onboarding phase. But I don't want to put too many words in your mouth.
No, I think you're absolutely right. There was a podcast, How I Built This, and it was one of my favorite lines was when he was interviewing the founder of Stonyfield, which makes cream and yogurt products and dairy products, and he said the hardest part to sell is the 18 inches from the spoon to the mouth. Like just getting the person to take the taste, and then once you're there, like the aha moment, jumps in. And you're absolutely right. The from an onboarding stage, I've found throughout the years when I do a presentation, I found when I use the word instant quote, people think it's instant quote submission because their latest and greatest experience for quoting was a digital submission form, and what we're actually providing is pricing and lead time immediately on our services. And so I started changing my language when I talk in webinars or podcasts or other mediums to instant pricing, even though we have like all of our website instant quoting to help kind of build a better expectation of what we have. But when we get customers, kind of warm leads inside sales, and they're working through a workflow. And even on our site, we've have covered it essentially with many places where you can find how-tos, quick videos to actually use the platform itself. So yeah, I live in the technical processes, but the product marketing side is just so important when you are a digital marketplace platform. And I'm not sure if this is exactly where you're going with it, but that's something that is part of our role too. Is not just the tech specs, like the what is, the why is, but building that a very quick way for people to see the how to and get them excited about trying it themselves. Because yeah, that little distance, just a click, get a quote, and dragging and dropping a file in. I mean, you're getting quotes in seconds. So it's that time it takes for, or like reducing the anxiety of what happens when I click here is also part of our goals. Yeah.
Just as a side note, I'm going to link that Stonyfield episode because that has ups and downs that, so Steven Spielberg couldn't take you on a journey as good as that story. It is one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to in my life. And I aspire to be 1/10 as good of a host as Guy Raz. But anyway.
Well, I'm curious. What's the best piece of content you've ever created? What's the one thing that you've written or produced or had a part in that you're like, that's a grand slam right there.
So something I'm really proud of, and something I'm working to build more of as well, is a series called Will It, and this is a series we have a host on YouTube, and we use Vimeo for kind of site hosting. And so if you're on Xometry's YouTube channel, look at engineering challenges. That's where you're going to find these series of videos. I came from product development, and I've broken a lot of parts of my life, on purpose, as well as like accidentally, and during different phases of testing. Just a real quick background: I worked at ruggedized defense products, so stuff that soldiers may use or may be installed in forward operating bases, and we had military standard tests throughout that, whether it's chemical compatibility, impact resistance, hot and cold temperature tests, flame retardants, and I wanted to create a series of experiments demystifying what a material can do, because when you talk, especially on 3D printing, which has been my background, there's a huge hype curve there on what 3D printing can do. And I'm like, well, I actually used it, and I've used it for 15 years in end use applications, and I could tell you when and where to use the process for material. But if you don't believe me, let me show you. So I've taken these. I've essentially have designed material swatches depending on the experiment I'm doing. And I will print them out in a variety of processes that are often seen as competitive processes, but I just want to put them on a level playing field by making the same design at each one of these processes or materials. And I put it through a test that is not a scientific test. It's one that you can have empathy around. Like, you may not know, for example, when I talk about tons of pressure, you may not know what that feels like, right? But you know what it feels like to smash something with your foot? And so we can do that. And I know our first couple wheelet tests was just like a water leaking test, and 3D printing essentially disc golf frisbees and chucking them at a wall. And although like there's some wiggle room in the science, the results really did show a differentiation of the product that we are selling. As well, it's something that someone just can instantly empathize with. Like, they know what it's like to, like, what it could be like to chuck something at a wall, or put something on the end of a power drill and like watch it kind of spin around and vibrate, tumble in a cement mixer, and we've made a series of these videos to explain the properties and expectations of different processes using experimental design that can be replicated, in your, first I'm going to say don't try this at home, but, can be replicated with home products. So I think that's something that is a unique twist for us, especially on the additive manufacturing side. But I'm really happy with those videos that we've produced. And we've had a slowdown during the pandemic just because getting on site was, really difficult. But, that's something that we hope to just do more and more of, especially as we have all these processes and we're able to, show more materials than ever before.
I guess what really strikes me about that is that, oftentimes people think about technical content and they think about that the hurdle is to make it sufficiently technical. Like, how do we make it more scientific, right?
Yeah.
So that we don't appear stupid in front of all of the very smart engineers who are going to be consuming this content. And Greg, what this notion of bringing empathy into it, especially in this video example, it kind of runs the other way of that a bit,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the technical specs are very, very good for engineering and simulation. But the truth is, if you look around you, how many things around you are a tensile bar? None. None of it is. And so when we talk about design and design intent, those tech specs will bring you so far, but those are specs around tensile bars. But there's a reason why you can cut a steak with a plastic knife. It's not just the material properties; it's design. That knife, if you could look at the cross profile, is a T. It has a reinforcing rib on it, and that's what we've tried to put into these experiments. Is there's a practicality there. In fact, actually, although we do some material sampling, I'm actually not a fan of material swatches as a sample, typically, because I'd rather, if you had a larger design, I'd rather you just take a digital cutout of a piece of your design and print it or manufacture it directly, because it's going to be like, that's my design in that material. It's not some little rectangle in that material that doesn't really tell you too much other than what does my rectangle look like. And that's something that, again, I've worked the practical experience for such a long time, that the science does need to exist. That technical content, that technical aspect does need to exist. But my job to communicate is the differentiation between these products, the where and why they're used, and that has a little bit more of a qualitative aspect to it.
You can educate and entertain, as you said, at the same time.
Edutaining, yeah.
Yep. I mean, the next logical step with this is to go kind of where Mythbusters went, and if you can't break it, you need to blow it up.
So
That's the last stage of
that actually, that's my previous job. We call it crawl, then walk, then run, where you first start pretty gently, and then you start building up until essentially you're trying to slam the thing in a car door, and your goal is to bring it up to a failure mode. And by the way, I've had experiments where I thought I was going to start gentle, and then they just went hard from the get-go. There's a really good one called Will It Tumble that we filmed. Again, we filmed it like, the film quality is, it's what it is, because we kind of filmed it during the pandemic, and we were all like in masks and close quarters, so we're trying to play it safe there. But it is a really entertaining video where we test 15 different materials made over 5 different processes, and tumbling a cement mixer. And I thought they were just going to be this gentle drop. No, that cement mixer only had one speed. It was just basically just slamming these balls of materials down. And I was like, okay, so we're going to get some failures within the first 14 seconds here, and down select really, really quickly on what's going to survive. Yeah.
That sounds like perfect content for, people who are still 12 years old at heart.
Yeah.
I would love doing that. Yeah.
Well, it's been fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing your experience with us today. It's been really enjoyed this conversation.
This is fun to talk about. I mean, the other thing I'll say is, and I know we talked about this full circle on being an accidental tour guide and whatnot, is I think there is something to have, technical empathy, to have empathy for the customers. And one of the things that I'm really fortunate for, really, 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 really fortunate for, is working with leadership and people within the company who have helped me grow the messaging and what I want to do and build it into a scalable system through marketing. But that's not always the case, so I've been really, really fortunate along my journey here, and just want to express my gratitude, because we do some really cool stuff at Xometry, and it's really cool to be part of that experience from broadcasting the technical content to working directly with our customers and everything in between.
It's a great way to leave it. Thanks a lot, Greg.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to The Kula Ring with Carmen Perry and Jeff White. Don't miss a single manufacturing marketing insight. Subscribe now at kulapartners.com/The Kula Ring. That's KULApartners.com/The Kula Ring.